The 5-year-old boy places his drawing on the billionaire's desk. Stick figures holding hands labeled me, Maxwell, Mama, and Daddy. I put you in it even though you've never met us. Maybe if you saw it, you'd want to. The CEO stares at his own sons like they're strangers. Thank you. It's very nice. Then he asks them to leave. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from and don't forget to click subscribe. The keycard wouldn't work. Jasmine Harris stood in the lobby of the luxury apartment building where she'd lived for 3 years. Her body still aching from 36 hours of labor, her arms empty because the twins were still in the NICU, and the keycard that should have opened the elevator to the penthouse just kept flashing red. She tried it again, then again, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the card steady. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but that card has been deactivated." The doorman wouldn't meet her eyes, and Jasmine felt something cold settle in her chest. "Mr. Whitmore left instructions that you're no longer a resident here." The world tilted sideways. "That's not possible." "I live here. I've lived here for 3 years. My things are up there. My clothes, my documents, everything I own. Your belongings were moved to a storage facility." The doorman finally looked at her, and she saw pity in his face that made her want to scream. "The address and access code are in this envelope. Mr. Whitmore also asked me to give you this." He handed her 2 envelopes. One had a storage facility logo. The other was heavy, expensive stationery that she recognized as the kind Derek used for business correspondence. She opened it with numb fingers and found a check for $50,000 and a single typed sentence. "This should cover your immediate expenses. My attorney will be in touch." Jasmine stood in that gleaming lobby, still bleeding from childbirth, her breasts leaking milk for babies she couldn't hold yet, and realized that Derek Whitmore, the man she'd loved for 3 years, the father of her children, had thrown her out like garbage while she was in the hospital giving birth to his sons. She should have seen it coming. That's what she would think later, in the dark moments when sleep wouldn't come and shame burned through her like acid. She should have known that men like Derek didn't end up with women like her. He was the 34-year-old white CEO of a tech startup that had just gone public, making him worth over $200 million overnight. She was a 27-year-old black woman who'd been waitressing at the restaurant where his company held their celebration dinner. He'd asked for her number, and she'd been stupid enough to think it meant something. For 3 years, she'd believed in the fairy tale. He'd moved her into his penthouse, encouraged her to quit her job, talked about the future in vague terms that she'd interpreted as promises. When she'd gotten pregnant, he'd seemed happy at first, excited even. He'd gone to the first ultrasound, had his assistant research the best prenatal care, had told her not to worry about anything. The change had been gradual, so gradual she'd convinced herself she was imagining it. He started working later, coming home after she was asleep. He stopped asking about the pregnancy, barely glanced at the ultrasound photos she left on the kitchen counter. When she'd found out at 5 months that she was having twins, he'd gone pale and excused himself to take a call that lasted 3 hours. "Twins are expensive," he'd said later when she'd cornered him. "I need to make sure the company's stable enough to support a family." She'd believed him because she'd wanted to, because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. Now she stood in the lobby with a check that was supposed to compensate for 3 years of her life and 2 babies she'd delivered alone because Derek had claimed a business emergency in Singapore, even though she knew he was lying because his assistant had accidentally mentioned seeing him at the office that morning. Jasmine took a cab to the hospital with the last of the cash in her purse. The storage unit could wait. Her sons couldn't. Marcus and Maxwell, born 5 weeks early at 4 pounds each, fighting for every breath in incubators that cost more per day than she'd made in a month as a waitress. The hospital's social worker had already been by that morning, asking gentle questions about insurance and family support that Jasmine had deflected because Derek had promised that everything was arranged. But nothing was arranged. The insurance card he'd given her was declined. The hospital was already calculating costs that would bury her in debt for the rest of her life. And when she called Derek's cell phone from the NICU waiting room, it went straight to voicemail. She tried his office. His assistant Amanda answered with that carefully professional tone that meant she'd been coached. Mr. Whitmore is unavailable. All personal matters should be directed through his attorney. I'm emailing you the contact information now. Amanda, please. I need to talk to him about the boys. They're in the NICU. They need their father. I'm sorry, Jasmine. I've been instructed not to put through any calls. The attorney will handle everything. The line went dead. And Jasmine sat in that waiting room, looking through the window at her tiny sons hooked up to machines, and felt something inside her break, and then immediately harden into something stronger. Rage, maybe. Or determination. Or the kind of desperation that turns women into warriors because they have no other choice. She cashed Derek's check. $50,000 felt like a fortune and an insult simultaneously. She used it to pay the hospital bills that insurance wouldn't cover, to put down first and last month's rent on a tiny apartment, in a neighborhood where gunshots were more common than birdsong, to buy a second-hand crib and bottles and diapers and all the things two premature babies needed to survive. Derek's attorney sent paperwork, mountains of it. A settlement agreement that gave her full custody in exchange for signing away any future claims to child support beyond a structured payment plan that was calculated to be the minimum legally required. The attorney made it clear that if she fought it, Derek had the resources to bury her in court costs, to drag out proceedings for years while her sons went without. He'd pay exactly what the court ordered, and not a penny more, and she could take it or spend years fighting for scraps. She signed. She had no choice. And she spent the next 5 years surviving on that minimal support and her own determination, working 3 jobs while the twins were in daycare, then preschool, then kindergarten, building a life from nothing while Derek Whitmore got richer and more successful and never once asked to meet his sons. The twins knew they had a father. Jasmine had never lied to them about that. Your daddy is very busy with work, she'd say, which was true if incomplete. He loves you, but he can't be here. Which was mostly false but kinder than the truth. Marcus and Maxwell were 5 years old now, bright and beautiful and utterly identical except for the small birthmark on Maxwell's left shoulder. They were starting to ask harder questions. Why didn't Daddy ever visit? Why didn't they have his last name? Why did other kids have fathers at school events and they didn't? Jasmine did her best. She was mom and dad both. She made it to every school event even if it meant losing wages. She read them stories and helped with homework and taught them to be kind and strong and proud of who they were. She told them they were loved, so loved, even if she sometimes felt like she was drowning in exhaustion and worry and the constant background terror that one medical emergency or job loss would destroy the fragile stability she'd built. She tried not to think about Derek, tried not to check his social media, though she sometimes couldn't help herself. His company had expanded internationally. He'd been featured in Forbes, in Business Week, in all the publications that celebrated young, successful white men who built empires. There were photos of him at galas with beautiful women on his arm, none of them lasting more than a few months. He looked happy, successful, unburdened. He'd moved on like she and the twins had never existed. That's what Jasmine thought until the night Marcus found the box. She kept it in the back of her closet, hidden under winter clothes they couldn't afford to replace. In it were the remnants of her life before. Photos of her and Derek, the key card that had stopped working, ultrasound images, a positive pregnancy test she'd saved for some stupid sentimental reason. She'd meant to throw it all away 1,000 times, but never could quite manage it. Marcus had been looking for his winter coat and found the box instead. He brought it to her with the photos fanned out in his small hands, his expression confused. "Mama, who's this man with you?" Jasmine's heart stopped. In the photo, she and Derek were at some company party, his arm around her waist, both of them laughing at something. She looked so young in that picture, so stupidly happy. "That's your father," she said quietly, because lying seemed worse than the truth. Maxwell appeared in the doorway, drawn by his twin's voice. Both boys stared at the photo with identical expressions of wonder and confusion. "He looks nice," Maxwell said, which broke Jasmine's heart because Derek had looked nice, had been nice when it suited him, had been everything she'd wanted until the moment it became inconvenient. "Can we meet him?" Marcus asked. "Baby, it's complicated. But we want to meet our daddy." Maxwell's voice was small, pleading. "Other kids have daddies. Why can't we?" Jasmine pulled them both into her lap, breathing in the scent of their hair, feeling the weight of them that was all that mattered in the world. Sometimes adults make choices that hurt people. Your father made a choice to not be part of our lives. That doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means he wasn't ready to be a daddy. Is he ready now? Marcus asked, with the devastating logic of a 5-year-old. I don't know, baby. Can we ask him? She should have said no. Should have protected them from the rejection she knew was coming. But she looked at their faces, so full of hope and longing, and couldn't bring herself to be the one who crushed it. We can try, she said, and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Finding Derek's current address turned out to be easier than expected. His company's headquarters were public information, and a few strategic Google searches revealed he'd moved to a mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. One of those sprawling estates that you saw in magazines, all stone and glass and old money, even though Derek's money was brand new. Jasmine stood outside the mansion 3 days later, the twins on either side of her holding her hands, and wondered what the hell she was doing. She'd dressed them in their best clothes, the button-down shirts and khakis she usually saved for school photos. She'd tried to explain what might happen, that their father might not want to see them. But how do you prepare 5-year-olds for rejection from a parent they've never met? The security at the gate was immediately intimidating. A guardhouse, cameras, an intercom system. Jasmine pressed the button with a shaking hand. Can I help you? A woman's voice, professional and slightly annoyed. I'm here to see Derek Whitmore. My name is Jasmine Harris. She hesitated. What was she? Ex-girlfriend sounded too casual. Baby mama felt demeaning. I'm the mother of his children. Silence. Then, Mr. Whitmore isn't expecting you. I know, but his sons are here and they'd like to meet him. Just for a few minutes. Please. More silence. Jasmine could feel the twins pressed against her legs, picking up on her tension. Marcus squeezed her hand tighter. I'll need to verify your identity. Please look at the camera. Jasmine looked up at the camera mounted above the gate, feeling exposed and judged. She held up the boys' birth certificates that she'd brought, showing them to the camera lens. Wait there. 10 minutes passed. 15. The twins started to fidget, and Jasmine was about to give up and leave when the gate finally swung open. Follow the driveway to the main house. Someone will meet you there. Her heart was hammering as she walked up the curved driveway with the boys. The estate was even more impressive up close, all manicured lawns and expensive landscaping. Derek had done well for himself. Better than well. He'd become exactly the kind of success story that America loved to celebrate. A woman met them at the front door, late 30s, blonde, professionally dressed in a way that screamed personal assistant or house manager. Her eyes went immediately to the twins, and Jasmine saw her do the math, saw the moment she recognized Derek in their features. Miss Harris, I'm Caroline, Mr. Whitmore's executive assistant. He's agreed to see you for 15 minutes. I need to make clear that this is a courtesy, not a legal proceeding, and anything discussed here has no bearing on the existing custody agreement. The legal speak made Jasmine's jaw clench, but she nodded. I understand. The boys just want to meet their father. Caroline's expression flickered with something that might have been sympathy, but it was gone too quickly to be sure. She led them through a foyer that was bigger than Jasmine's entire apartment, down a hallway lined with modern art, into an office that screamed power and money. Derek sat behind a massive desk, and for a moment, Jasmine was transported back 5 years to when they'd first met. He looked older, more polished, but still handsome in that clean-cut white American way that opened doors and hearts. His eyes moved from her to the twins, and she saw him go very still. The twins stared at him with identical wide-eyed expressions, taking in this stranger who was supposedly their father. Marcus and Maxwell looked so small in that enormous office, so out of place among the leather and chrome and success. Hello, Derek, Jasmine said, proud that her voice didn't shake. Jasmine. His voice was carefully neutral. This is unexpected. The boys found photos. They wanted to meet you. She gently pushed the twins forward. Marcus, Maxwell, this is your father. Hi, Daddy, Maxwell said, his voice tiny and hopeful. And Jasmine watched Derek's face for any sign of recognition, of love, of acknowledgement that these were his sons. What she saw instead was calculation. Derek's eyes moved over the boys like they were a business problem he needed to solve, not children who'd spent 5 years wondering why their father didn't want them. "They look healthy," he said finally, directing the comment to Jasmine, not to them. "They are. Smart, too. Marcus is reading at a second-grade level. Maxwell's incredible at math." "Good." Derek steepled his fingers, a gesture she remembered from when he was thinking through a deal. "I assume you're here because you need more money." The words were like a slap. "I'm here because your sons wanted to meet you." "Right." He didn't sound convinced. "Well, they've met me. Was there anything else?" Marcus's hand tightened in hers, and Jasmine realized with horror that he understood. 5 years old, and he was already learning what rejection felt like. "Actually, yes." Her voice came out harder than intended. "I wanted them to see what kind of man abandons his children. To understand that having money doesn't make you a father, and that some people are so broken inside that they can't love anything that doesn't serve them. I wanted them to meet you so that when they grow up and have their own kids, they'll know exactly what kind of father not to be." Derek's face hardened. "I've met my legal obligations. The settlement agreement is a piece of paper that lets you sleep at night. It doesn't change the fact that you threw us out while I was giving birth, that you never asked to meet your sons, that you pay the bare minimum because you have to, not because you want to." Jasmine was shaking now, 5 years of anger finally finding its voice. "These boys are the best thing that ever happened to me, and you treat them like a line item in your budget. If you came here to guilt trip me, I came here because they deserve better than a father who doesn't exist. But you're right. We shouldn't have bothered. Come on, boys. We're leaving." She turned to go, but Marcus pulled his hand free and walked up to Derek's desk. He pulled something from his pocket, a drawing he'd made at school. Stick figures labeled me, Maxwell, Mama, and Daddy, all holding hands under a smiling sun. "I made this for you," Marcus said, placing it on the desk. "Teacher said we should draw our families. I put you in it even though Mama said you were too busy to visit. I thought maybe if you saw it, you'd want to come meet us." The room was silent except for the ticking of an expensive clock on the wall. Derek stared at the drawing like it was a bomb, and Jasmine saw something flicker across his face. Guilt? Regret? It was gone too fast to identify. "Thank you," Derek said stiffly. "It's very nice." "Do you want to come to our birthday?" Maxwell asked, emboldened by his brother. "We're going to be 6 next month. Mama said we can have a party at the park." Derek's jaw clenched. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" "Because—" He was struggling now, the smooth CEO facade cracking slightly. "Because your mother and I agreed that it's better if I'm not involved. But you're our daddy." Marcus's voice was plaintive, confused. "Daddies are supposed to be involved. Not all daddies can be there all the time." "Sometimes." Derek stopped, seeming to realize he was explaining himself to a 5-year-old. "Sometimes it's just not possible." Jasmine had heard enough. She gathered the boys, ignoring their protests, and headed for the door. Caroline was waiting to escort them out, her expression carefully blank. They were almost to the front entrance when Derek appeared in the hallway. "Jasmine, wait." She turned, the twins pressed against her sides, both of them confused and hurt in a way that would require years of therapy to undo. "I'll double the child support payments," Derek said, "and set up education funds for both of them. Full college tuition, wherever they want to go." "I don't want your money, Derek. I want you to want them." "I can't give you that." His voice was raw, more honest than she'd heard it in 5 years. "I'm not built that way. I don't know how to be a father. I just disappoint them more than I already have. You're disappointing them right now." "I know." He looked at the boys, really looked at them, and Jasmine saw something that might have been pain cross his face. "I'm sorry. For all of it. You deserved better. They deserve better." "Then be better." "I can't." He said it with finality. "I've accepted who I am." A man who's good at making money and terrible at everything else. They're better off without me. He turned and walked away, disappearing back into his mansion, leaving them standing in the foyer, like the unwanted visitors they were. Caroline escorted them to the gate without speaking, and Jasmine walked back to her car with a twin on each hand, both of them silent in a way that broke her heart more than crying would have. It wasn't until they were 10 minutes down the road that Maxwell spoke. "Mama, does Daddy not love us?" Jasmine pulled over, unable to drive through the tears that had finally come. She unbuckled them both and pulled them into the front seat, holding them as tightly as she could. "Listen to me. Both of you. Sometimes people aren't capable of love, not because there's something wrong with the people they should love, but because there's something broken in them. Your father, he's got a piece missing inside him that means he can't be the daddy you deserve. But that doesn't mean you're not lovable. You are the most lovable boys in the entire world. You are kind and smart and funny and perfect, and if he can't see that, it's his loss, not yours. Never yours." They cried together in that car on the side of the road, and Jasmine made a silent vow that this was the last time Derek Whitmore would hurt her sons. She'd build them a life so full of love and stability that his absence wouldn't matter. She'd be enough somehow, even when it felt impossible. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known as she drove home with her heartbroken boys, was that Derek stood at his office window watching them leave. Caroline beside him with an expression of profound disappointment. "You could have tried," Caroline said quietly. "They're beautiful boys. I know. You could have at least pretended to care. Pretending would be worse." Derek's voice was hollow. "Better they hate me cleanly than love me and be constantly disappointed. That's cowardice talking. Maybe." He turned from the window. "Make arrangements for the increased payments. And the education funds. Make them generous. Money isn't what they need from you. It's all I have to give." Caroline looked at him with something close to disgust. "You're wrong about that. But you'll never know it, will you? You'll just keep telling yourself you're protecting them by staying away, when really you're protecting yourself from having to be uncomfortable." She left him standing there, and Derek looked down at the drawing still on his desk. Stick figures holding hands. A family that existed only in a 5-year-old's imagination. He picked it up, started to throw it away, then stopped and put it in his desk drawer instead. 5 years of child support payments. 2 more and they'd be adults. Then his obligation would be finished, and he could close this chapter of his life completely. It was better this way. Cleaner. They'd be fine without him. Kids were resilient. He almost believed it. Jasmine spent the next week dealing with the fallout. The twins were quieter than usual, more clingy. Marcus stopped drawing families at school. Maxwell had nightmares about being locked out of big houses. They were processing rejection from a parent who'd never been there to reject them in the first place, and Jasmine felt helpless rage at Derek for doing this to them when they'd been fine. Relatively fine. Before she'd let them hope. The increased child support showed up in her account right on schedule. Exactly twice what he'd been paying before, deposited automatically, no note or explanation. Blood money, she thought. Conscience payment. As if dollars could substitute for presents. She didn't cash it for a week. Pride made her want to send it back, to tell him to shove his money where the sun didn't shine. But pride didn't pay rent. Pride didn't buy shoes for growing feet or fund field trips, or cover the cost of Maxwell's glasses he'd need after his last eye exam. So she deposited it and hated herself and Derek both, but not equally. Never equally. Then the letter came. Heavy cardstock, expensive envelope, return address of a law firm so prestigious Jasmine had seen their ads in airports. She opened it with shaking hands, expecting a lawsuit, expecting Derek to have changed his mind about even the minimal contact they'd had. Instead, it was from a trust officer. Education funds had been established for Marcus and Maxwell Whitmore, each containing $500,000 to be used for any accredited educational institution. Full ride to any college in the country, essentially. The letter went on to detail the terms, the management fees, the access protocols. At the bottom, in handwriting she recognized as Derek's, was a single line. I'm sorry I can't be what they need. Maybe this can help give them what they deserve. Jasmine sat at her kitchen table reading that line over and over, trying to decode it. Was it guilt? Conscience? A genuine desire to help despite his emotional bankruptcy? Or just another way to keep them at a distance while feeling like he'd done his duty? She didn't know. Didn't know if it mattered. The boys had a future now, at least financially. They could go to college without the crushing debt that had kept her from ever finishing her own degree. Derek was giving them opportunity, even if he couldn't give them himself. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like surrender. 5 years passed in the complicated dance of a family that shouldn't exist, but did anyway. The twins turned 10, then 11. They grew taller, smarter, more themselves. Marcus became quieter, more introspective, burying himself in books like they were shields against the world. Maxwell stayed boisterous, class clown energy masking something deeper that Jasmine recognized as her own tendency to hide pain behind performance. They didn't ask about Derek anymore. Not after that first devastating meeting. His absence became normal, expected, just part of the landscape of their lives. Jasmine rebuilt their world with careful intention. She went back to school part-time, finally finishing that business degree she'd abandoned years ago. She got promoted at her day job, moved them to a better apartment, created stability that felt earned rather than given. The increased child support helped, more than she wanted to admit, but she made sure the boys understood they succeeded because of their work, not because of money from a ghost father. She dated occasionally, though nothing stuck. Hard to trust men when the last one had thrown you out during childbirth. Harder still to find someone willing to take on a woman with twin boys and enough trauma to fill therapy sessions for years. She told herself she was fine alone. Told herself she didn't need partnership, didn't need help, didn't need anything but what she'd built with her own hands. Then the twins turned 11 and a half, and Derek's company collapsed. It was all over the news. Whitmore Technologies, the darling startup that had seemed invincible, brought down by fraud investigation and embezzlement charges. Not Derek himself, but his CFO and 2 other executives. They'd been cooking the books for years, inflating revenues, hiding losses. When it came out, the stock price crashed. Investors sued. The company filed for bankruptcy protection. And Derek, who'd built his identity on success, watched his empire crumble in real time. Jasmine saw the headlines and felt nothing. Maybe that was cruel. Maybe she should have felt sympathy for the father of her children facing catastrophic loss. But she remembered standing in that lobby with nowhere to go, remembered her sons' faces when Derek couldn't even pretend to want them. Some wells were too poisoned for sympathy to survive. She didn't expect the letter. It came 3 months after the bankruptcy filing, forwarded from the trust officer managing the boys' education funds. The funds themselves were protected, thank God, but the increased child support had stopped. Derek's personal assets were frozen pending investigation into what he'd known about the fraud. He'd gone from multimillionaire to potentially liable for criminal negligence if prosecutors decided he should have caught what his executives were doing. The letter was short, handwritten on plain paper instead of his usual expensive stationery. Jasmine, I have no right to ask you for anything. I know that. But I'm facing criminal charges that might result in prison time. If that happens, I need to know that you and the boys are taken care of. The education funds are protected, but everything else is frozen or gone. I've attached contact information for my new attorney. If I go to prison, there are things we need to discuss about the boys' future. I'm sorry. For everything. Always. Derek. She read it 3 times, looking for manipulation, for angles, for the trap she knew had to be there. But all she found was exhaustion and defeat leaking through every word. Derek Whitmore, who'd been too important to meet his own children, was asking for help from the woman he'd discarded. Jasmine threw the letter away, then dug it out of the trash an hour later, then threw it away again. The boys found her sitting at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, staring at the crumpled paper, trying to decide if she was a fool for even considering responding. Mama? Marcus stood in the doorway in his pajamas, Maxwell right behind him. They were so big now, faces losing their baby softness, growing into the men they'd become. Why are you sad? I'm not sad, baby. Just thinking. About our father? Maxwell had gotten good at reading her moods. We saw the news. About his company. She should have known they'd see it. 11-year-olds had phones now, had access to everything. She'd tried to shield them from Derek's existence, but you couldn't hide the internet. Yeah, about your father. Is he in trouble? Marcus's voice was careful, like he was testing whether he was allowed to care. He might be. He might go to prison. The twins exchanged a look, that twin telepathy thing they'd had since birth. Some wordless communication that left them on the same page without speaking. Do you think we should help him? Maxwell asked. I don't know if we can help him, baby. And I don't know if we should try. He's our father, Marcus said quietly, even if he's a bad one. That doesn't just stop, does it? Jasmine looked at her sons, these boys who were somehow better people than the adults who'd created them, and felt something shift in her chest. No, it doesn't just stop. She called the attorney the next morning. His name was Frank Morrison, and unlike Derek's previous lawyers, he sounded tired and overworked rather than aggressively protective. Miss Harris, thank you for calling. Derek mentioned you might not. I almost didn't. Jasmine watched the twins get ready for school through the kitchen doorway. What does he want from me? Honestly, I think he wants someone to tell him he's not completely irredeemable. The criminal charges are serious. Prosecutors are arguing he had to have known about the fraud, that as CEO he was responsible for oversight. If convicted, he's looking at 10 to 15 years. And if he's not convicted, then he's looking at bankruptcy, loss of reputation, essentially starting over from nothing. Frank paused. He's lost everything, Ms. Harris. His company, his money, his entire identity. The only things he has left are the sons he's never met and the woman he treated terribly. I think he's finally understanding what actually matters. Bit late for that. I agree. But he asked me to tell you that if something happens to him, he wants to make arrangements. He wants to know the boys will be okay, that they'll have what they need, and he... Frank hesitated. He asked if there was any chance you'd let him see them again. Before the trial. Just in case. Every instinct Jasmine had screamed to say no, to protect her boys from more rejection, more disappointment. But she heard Marcus's voice in her head. He's our father, even if he's a bad one. I'll talk to the boys, she said. But if they don't want to see him, that's final. I won't force them. Fair enough. That evening, she sat the twins down and told them everything. About Derek's legal troubles, about the possibility of prison, about his request to see them. She watched their faces, trying to gauge their reactions, ready to shut this down if they showed any hesitation. Will it be like last time? Maxwell asked. Will he act like he doesn't want us? I don't know, baby. Maybe. People don't change overnight, even when they lose everything. But maybe he's different now. Marcus's voice held cautious hope. Maybe losing everything made him understand. Maybe. Or maybe he's just scared and alone and we're the only people he can ask. The twins looked at each other again, that wordless conversation. Finally, Maxwell spoke. We want to see him. But not at his house. Somewhere neutral, somewhere we can leave if we want to. Jasmine felt pride and heartbreak tangle in her chest. Her boys, setting boundaries, protecting themselves while still extending grace. They were better than she was. They met Derek at a park. Public, neutral, easy to leave. Jasmine spotted him on a bench near the playground and barely recognized him. He'd lost weight. His clothes hung wrong. His hair had gone gray at the temples. He looked 10 years older than the last time she'd seen him, and she realized with shock that he looked scared. The twins hung back, suddenly uncertain. Jasmine put a hand on each of their shoulders. You want to do this? They nodded. She walked them over, keeping herself between Derek and the boys like a shield. Hello, Derek. He stood quickly, awkwardly, like he'd forgotten how bodies worked. Jasmine, boys, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. We weren't sure either, Maxwell said, direct as always. Derek's laugh was shaky. Fair enough. Would you like to sit? They arranged themselves on and around the bench, the boys between Jasmine and Derek, everyone carefully not touching. Derek kept looking at the twins like he was memorizing them, his expression raw with something Jasmine couldn't quite identify. "You've gotten so big," he said finally. "Last time I saw you, you were 5. Now you're, what, 11? 11 and a half, Marcus corrected. "Right, 11 and a half. Derek's hands twisted in his lap. "I saw your school photos. The trust officer sends them. You're both on the honor roll." "You looked at our photos?" Maxwell sounded surprised. "I look at all of them. Every year. I have them in a folder on my phone." Derek pulled out his phone with shaking hands, showed them the photos. Years of school pictures, candid shots Jasmine had sent to the trust officer for records, all saved and organized by date. "I know it doesn't make up for anything. I know seeing photos isn't the same as being there. But I want you to know that I've always seen you. I've always known you existed. I just didn't have the courage to do anything about it." "Why not?" Marcus asked. And Jasmine heard the hurt underneath the question. 6 years of abandonment condensed into 2 words. Derek was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was thick. "Because I'm a coward. Because I watched my own father destroy my mother with his absence and coldness, and I swore I'd never be like him. So instead of risking being a bad father, I chose to be no father at all. I told myself you were better off without me, that I was protecting you from my failures. But you failed us anyway," Maxwell said. "By not being there." "I know." Derek's eyes were wet. "I know I failed you in the worst way possible. I thought money could substitute for presence. I thought if I provided financially, that was enough. But you can't buy love with trust funds and child support. You can't make up for missed birthdays with college tuition. Did you ever want us?" Marcus's voice was small, young in a way he usually wasn't anymore. "Yes." Derek said it fiercely. "God, yes. When your mother was pregnant, I was terrified and thrilled and completely unprepared. I wanted you desperately. But then the reality hit. Twins meant twice the responsibility, twice the cost, twice the ways I could fail. And I panicked. I convinced myself that you needed a father who was perfect, and since I couldn't be perfect, I shouldn't be there at all." "That's stupid," Maxwell said bluntly. "Nobody's perfect. I know that now. But 11 years ago, I didn't. I was 34 years old and still acting like a child myself. And by the time I realized what I'd given up, I'd hurt you all so badly, I didn't think I could fix it." Jasmine had been silent, letting the boys lead, but now she spoke. "What changed?" "Why now, Derek? Is it just because you're facing prison and suddenly regret what you've lost?" "Partly," he admitted. "Losing everything clarifies what matters. But also," he looked at the twins, really looked at them. "I saw you on the news. Both of you. That story about the school science fair? Marcus won first place and Maxwell was right there celebrating with him. And the reporter asked what you wanted to be when you grew up. Do you remember what you said?" Marcus shook his head. "You said you wanted to be someone who helps people. Someone who shows up when it matters. Someone who doesn't run away when things get hard." Derek's voice broke. "And I realized my sons were already better men at 11 than I'd been at 34. That you'd learned how to be good people despite me, not because of me. And I needed, to at least try to deserve you before it was too late." "It might already be too late," Jasmine said quietly. "I know." Derek wiped his eyes. "But I had to try anyway." They sat in silence, watching other families at the park. Fathers pushing kids on swings, mothers catching them at the bottom of slides. All the small moments of presence that Derek had missed and could never get back. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said finally. "Anything. If you don't go to prison, what happens then? Do you disappear again? Or do you actually try to be our father?" Derek looked at Jasmine, asking permission for something she wasn't sure she wanted to give. But the twins were looking at him with fragile hope, and she couldn't bring herself to crush it. "If I don't go to prison," Derek said slowly, I want to try. To be the father I should have been from the beginning. I can't promise I'll be good at it. I don't know how to be a dad. But I'm willing to learn if you're willing to teach me. We don't know how to teach you, Maxwell pointed out. We're kids. Then maybe we figure it out together. Jasmine stood up. Boys, go play for a few minutes. I need to talk to your father alone. They ran off to the playground, and she watched them go before turning to Derek with all the rage she'd been holding back. Let me be very clear about something. I don't trust you. I don't forgive you. And I will never ever forget what you did to us. But those boys deserve a father, even an imperfect one. So if you're serious about this, if you actually want to try, I won't stop you. But the second you hurt them again, the second you disappoint them or let them down or make them feel like they're not worth your time, I will end this. Are we clear? Crystal clear. I mean it, Derek. They've spent their entire lives without you. They're fine without you. This is a privilege, not a right. You earn it every day, or you lose it permanently. I understand.
Do you? Because this isn't about throwing money at a problem or having your assistant handle the details. This is showing up to school events and helping with homework and being there when they're sick or scared or just need someone. This is boring, exhausting, thankless work most of the time. Can you handle that? Derek looked at the boys on the playground. Marcus helping Maxwell across the monkey bars, even though Maxwell was fully capable of doing it himself. I don't know, but I want to try. Try isn't enough. Then I'll do. I'll show up, every day, until they believe I'm not going away again. I'll prove I've changed. Actions prove things. Words are just air. Then watch my actions.
The trial started 2 months later. Jasmine took the boys to the courthouse on the first day because Derek had asked them to be there. Not for him, he'd said, but so he could see them, so he'd remember what he was fighting for. They sat in the gallery, 3 brown faces in a sea of white legal professionals and journalists, and watched Derek stand before a judge and plead not guilty to 23 counts of negligence and fraud. In the months leading up to the trial, Derek had tried. Jasmine gave him that. He showed up to the boys' soccer games, sat in the bleachers and cheered even though he clearly didn't understand the rules. He took them to dinner once a week, awkward meals where no one quite knew what to say, but they all tried anyway. He called them on school nights to ask about their homework, their friends, their lives. He was trying to build a relationship from nothing, and it was painful and clumsy, and sometimes almost beautiful in its earnestness. The boys started to soften toward him. Slowly, cautiously, like animals learning to trust someone who'd hurt them before. Marcus showed Derek his drawings. Maxwell told him jokes. They weren't calling him Dad yet, probably wouldn't for a long time if ever, but they were letting him be present. That was more than Jasmine had expected. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Jasmine didn't attend most of it, but she followed the coverage. Derek's defense was that he'd trusted his executives, that the fraud had been hidden from him through sophisticated accounting tricks, that he was a victim too. The prosecution argued he'd been willfully blind, that warning signs had been everywhere, that as CEO he bore ultimate responsibility. It could have gone either way. The verdict came on a Thursday. Not guilty on all counts. The jury believed Derek had been negligent in his oversight, but not criminally so. He wouldn't go to prison, but the civil suits would still bankrupt him. His reputation was destroyed, and the company he'd built was gone forever. Jasmine got the news from a text from Frank, Derek's attorney. Then another text, this one from Derek himself. Can I see the boys? I need to see them. They met at the park again, neutral ground. Derek looked exhausted, wrung out, but there was something different in his face. Relief, maybe, or resignation. Or the beginning of peace with who he actually was instead of who he'd pretended to be. I didn't go to prison, he told the boys. We know. We saw the news. Marcus was using his careful voice, the one that meant he was processing something big. So, what happens now? Maxwell asked. Now I figure out what comes next. I'm broke. My company's gone. My reputation's shot. I'm 45 years old and starting completely over. Derek smiled, and it was the most genuine expression Jasmine had ever seen on his face. Honestly, it's terrifying, but also kind of freeing. I spent 20 years building something that turned out to be built on lies. Maybe it's time I built something real instead. Like what? Marcus asked. I don't know yet. But I know I want you guys to be part of it. However that looks. Whatever you're comfortable with. The twins looked at Jasmine, asking permission. She nodded slowly. That's up to you, boys. You decide how much of a relationship you want with your father. We want one, Maxwell said, direct as always. But we need you to prove you mean it. That you're not just here because you lost everything else. Fair. Derek looked at Jasmine. What about you? Can you ever forgive me? She considered lying. Considered the easy answer that would make everyone comfortable. But the boys deserved honesty, even when it was hard. I don't know. Maybe someday. But forgiveness isn't the same as trust, and trust takes time. You destroyed mine pretty thoroughly. You'll have to rebuild it piece by piece, and there are no guarantees I'll ever fully give it back. I'll take that chance. Why? The question burst out of her, years of confusion finally finding voice. Why now? Why couldn't you do this 10 years ago when it would have mattered? When we needed you? Derek was quiet for a long time. The boys had wandered off to play again, giving the adults space. Because 10 years ago, I was still trying to be the person I thought I should be. The successful CEO, the self-made millionaire, the guy who had it all figured out. I couldn't reconcile that image with being a father, with having this complicated, messy family that didn't fit the narrative. So I chose the image and lost the reality. And now? Now the image is gone. The money's gone. The success is gone. All I have left is the truth of who I am. A deeply flawed man who made terrible choices and hurt people I should have protected. But also, a man who wants to do better. Who's willing to start from zero if it means getting a chance to know his sons. Pretty words, Jasmine said. But her voice had lost its edge. I know. That's all they are until I prove them with action. But I'm asking for the chance to prove them. Not for me. For them. He nodded toward the boys. They deserve a father who shows up. I want to be that father, even if I don't know how yet. Jasmine watched Marcus and Maxwell on the swings, pumping their legs in tandem, racing to see who could go higher. They were almost too big for the playground, would outgrow it soon. Time moved so fast. In 7 years they'd be adults, and whatever foundation Derek built with them had to be built now. Okay, she said finally. But we do this my way. Slow. Structured. You see them twice a week to start. If that goes well for 3 months, we increase it. You miss even one scheduled visit without a damn good reason, we go back to 0. You show up late, you show up drunk, you show up and make them feel like an obligation, we're done. This is their stability we're playing with, not yours. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't about your redemption arc, Derek. This is about 2 boys who've spent their entire lives without a father learning whether they can trust one. That's sacred. That's not something you get to screw up because you're having a bad day, or you're overwhelmed, or you decide it's too hard. I know what I'm asking for. I'm not going to waste it. You'd better not. They started slowly. Derek would pick up the boys every Saturday morning, take them for breakfast and whatever activity they wanted. Jasmine made herself stay home, made herself trust that he wouldn't disappoint them, made herself accept that she couldn't protect them from every possible hurt. It was agonizing. But Derek showed up. Every single Saturday, rain or shine, good days and hard days. He took them to museums and movies and batting cages. He helped them build a robot for the school science fair. He learned their favorite foods and their friend drama and their fears about middle school. He was learning to be a father in real time, and while he wasn't perfect, he was consistent. That counted for something. On their 12th birthday, Derek asked if he could throw them a party. A real one. Not just cake at home, but something bigger. Jasmine's instinct was to say no, to keep him at a careful distance. But the boys were excited at the prospect, and she couldn't deny them something they wanted just because she was afraid of getting hurt again. The party was at a trampoline park, crowded with classmates and chaos. Derek looked overwhelmed by the noise and the number of kids, but he stayed present, handing out pizza and making sure every kid got a turn at the activities. Jasmine watched him fumble through being a dad at a birthday party and felt something crack open in her chest. He was trying so hard. It was almost painful to witness. Near the end of the party, Marcus and Maxwell pulled Derek aside. Jasmine watched from across the room as they had a whispered conversation, saw Derek's face go through several emotions at once. Then the boys hugged him, actually hugged him, and Derek held on to them like they were the only solid things in a spinning world. Later, after the guests had left and they were cleaning up, Derek pulled Jasmine aside. They asked if they could call me Dad. Her breath caught. What did you say? I said I'd be honored, but only if they really meant it, not just because they felt like they should. His eyes were wet. They said they meant it, that I'm not perfect, but I show up, and showing up counts. Those were their exact words. Jasmine felt tears threatening and blinked them back. It does count. For them. But Derek, I know, if I disappear again, if I let them down, it'll destroy them worse than never being there at all. I know the stakes. I'm not going to blow this. See that you don't. He helped her carry gifts to the car, and for a moment they stood in the parking lot. This unlikely family connected by two boys who deserved better than either of them had originally given. Thank you, Derek said quietly, for giving me this chance. You didn't have to. I didn't do it for you. I did it for them. I know, but still. Thank you. Jasmine looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in years. He'd aged, but there was something softer about him now, less polished and more real. The Derek who'd thrown her out had been all hard edges and calculated moves. This Derek was still learning how to be human. You know what the hardest part is? She said. Watching you become the father they needed and wondering if you could have been this person all along. If all those years we lost were just because you were too scared to try, they were, Derek said simply. I can't take that back. I can only try to make the years ahead count for something, then make them count. As the boys got older, the dynamic shifted. Derek was part of their lives now, reliably, consistently. He'd found work consulting for startups, using the skills he'd built even though his reputation meant he'd never run a company again. It was humbling work for a former CEO, but it paid enough to cover his rent and his child support, and the small extras that showed he was thinking about his sons. He wasn't rich anymore, but he was present. That mattered more. Jasmine watched him show up to parent-teacher conferences, to school plays, to the small moments that make up a childhood. She watched the boy's relationship with him deepen from cautious to comfortable, to genuinely affectionate. She watched Derek make mistakes and apologize for them, watched him learn and grow in ways she'd never thought possible, and somewhere along the way, her anger started to transform into something more complicated. Not forgiveness exactly. The betrayal was too deep for that. But maybe acceptance. Maybe the understanding that people could be terrible and still become better. That redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about building something different in the present. On the twins' 13th birthday, Derek showed up to dinner at Jasmine's apartment with a wrapped box. For both of you, he said, setting it on the table. The boys tore into it and found photo albums, years' worth of pictures that Derek had been collecting, school photos, candid shots from their weekly outings, screenshots from video calls, all organized chronologically. At the front of each album was a letter. Marcus read his out loud, his voice cracking on the emotional parts. It was Derek's apology, written out in full, acknowledging every way he'd failed, every moment he'd missed, every hurt he'd caused. But it was also a love letter, celebrating who the boys had become despite his absence, promising to do better, asking for the grace to keep trying. Maxwell's letter was similar but personalized to him. By the time he finished reading it, everyone was crying, even Jasmine. I can't give you back the years I stole, Derek said, his voice thick. But I can promise you the years ahead. I can show up every day for whatever you need. I can be the father I should have been from the beginning. I can love you the way you've always deserved to be loved. You already are, Marcus said quietly. Yeah, Maxwell agreed. You're here. That's what matters. Jasmine watched her sons hug their father and felt the last piece of her anger finally crack and break. Derek had been terrible. He'd caused damage that had taken years to heal. But he'd also done the hardest thing. He'd admitted he was wrong, and then proved through action, consistent action, that he'd changed. Maybe that was enough. After the boys went to bed, Derek lingered in the doorway. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think you'll ever be able to look at me without seeing the man who hurt you? Jasmine considered the question honestly. I don't know. Some scars don't fully fade. But I can look at you and see the man who's trying. The man who shows up for his sons. The man who's learning to be better. That's not nothing. It's not everything either. No, but it's a start. Derek nodded slowly. I've been in therapy, working through why I ran, why I was so terrified of being a father. My therapist thinks it goes back to my own dad, to growing up watching him choose work over family over and over. I swore I'd never be like him, but I became exactly like him by running away instead of risking failure. That's probably true, Jasmine said, but reasons aren't excuses. Understanding why you did something doesn't undo the harm. I know. I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm just trying to make sure I don't repeat it. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. The boys asked me the other day if you and I would ever get back together. Jasmine's heart stuttered. What did you tell them? That it was complicated. That we were focused on co-parenting them, not on our own relationship, but they said they'd be okay with it if we wanted to try. That having their parents together would be nice. Derek's voice was careful, neutral. I told them it wasn't that simple. It's not. But what if it could be? The question hung in the air between them. Jasmine looked at this man who'd destroyed her, and then slowly rebuilt himself, and tried to imagine trusting him with her heart again. It seemed impossible. But then, 6 years ago, the idea of him being a present father had seemed impossible too. I don't know if I can do that, she said honestly. Trust you that way again. Let you close enough to hurt me. I understand. Derek's voice was soft. I just wanted you to know that if you ever decide you're willing to try, I'd like that chance. Not because I think I deserve it. I don't. But because what we built with the boys, that partnership, it's the best thing I've ever been part of. And I can't help wondering what else we might build together if we tried. That's a big if. I know, he smiled sadly. But I've learned to be patient. It's taken me 6 years to prove I can be a good father. I can wait however long it takes to prove I could be a good partner too, if you ever want me to try. He left before she could respond, and Jasmine sat in her quiet apartment, thinking about second chances and redemption, and whether some betrayals could ever truly be forgiven. She didn't have answers, but she had time, and maybe that was enough for now. 2 years later, the twins were 14 and starting high school. Jasmine had finished her master's degree and gotten promoted to management at her company. Derek's consulting business had grown enough that he'd been able to buy a small house in their neighborhood, close enough to walk to. The boys split their time between homes now, comfortable in both places, secure in the knowledge that both parents wanted them. On the anniversary of the first day, Derek had shown up at the park. 10 years after that devastating day in the hospital lobby, they had dinner together, all 4 of them. It had become tradition over the years, this annual reminder of how far they'd come. Remember when you couldn't stand to be in the same room with me? Derek said to Jasmine, passing her the salad. I still can't sometimes, she said, but she was smiling. You chew too loud. And you're too organized. It's unsettling. The boys laughed at their gentle bickering, comfortable with the dynamic that had evolved. Not romance. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But partnership, friendship, mutual respect built on years of showing up and doing the work. Later, after the boys had gone to Derek's house for the night, Jasmine found herself thinking about his question from years ago. Could they be more than co-parents? Could she trust him with her heart after he'd shattered it so completely? She still didn't know, but she was thinking about it. That was new. Her phone buzzed with a text from Derek. The boys are asleep. Thank you for dinner. Thank you for giving me a family. Thank you for not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. She typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, "You earned it. Keep earning it." His response came immediately. "Every day for the rest of my life." Jasmine looked at those words and felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet. But maybe the possibility of it. Maybe the understanding that people could do terrible things and still become better. That second chances, when truly earned, were worth giving. She didn't know what the future held. Didn't know if she and Derek would ever be more than friends and co-parents. But she knew her sons had a father who loved them, who showed up for them, who'd learned through years of consistent action what it meant to be present. That was more than she'd ever hoped for when she stood in that lobby with a useless keycard and nowhere to go. Sometimes redemption looked like this. Not a dramatic transformation, but slow, steady proof that change was possible. That people who'd failed could learn to do better. That families could be built from broken pieces if everyone was willing to do the work. The twins had taught her that, and Derek eventually, painfully, had proven it true. That was enough. For now, it was enough.